because he's not Dickens, he's not Thackeray, he's not Collins. He doesn't seem quite as eloquent as those people. But if you can put that aside and just read it as a book, they're really, really good. You know, I know you're going to say yes, it is a book, but I mean, take away any preconceived notions of Victorian literature, you know?
Yeah, Thomas Hardy to me, just what I know about him, he doesn't fit in with Victorian style. He
No.
seems too modern in
Yeah, he reads more modern somehow.
yeah. But again, I haven't never read him.
Hmm. So, basic premise of the book. We're in a little out of the way village, as a lot of, Victorian books are, I think, from Bronte or whatever. We're in a little village, Woodlanders, right? So they're in the woodlands, essentially.
Hmm.
But this dad has sent his daughter away to be properly educated because he wants her to, be better than he was in life, which is a very common
Yeah.
thing that like previous generations have done. That's why most millennials have degrees and all that kind of thing, right? So he sends her away to the continent to be educated. But she was betrothed to a Mr. Giles Winterbourne. And she was betrothed to him. And the husband is saying early in the book, he's talking to his wife and he's saying, I really want the best for my daughter. Um, but that's not going to happen because my plans for her marriage are actually not good. It's not to marry up. And the wife, who must have heard the story before, is like, oh yeah, tell me why. And he's like, well, I really wronged Giles' dad. So to make it up, I said that he could marry my daughter. So this is his
Okay.
idea. He's like, I was kind of bad to your dad, so I'm going to let you marry my daughter. Now, it's not forced. The two kids were also really, really good friends and very affectionate to each other, and we kind of get the feeling they were both happy to do this. Okay?
Yeah, they have some say in it, and they're like, yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fine with us.
And Giles still wants to marry her, but she's been away for a couple of years, getting her education. So she comes back and she's immediately very haughty. She's forgotten the old playtime they used to have together. And she starts talking, all this intellectual stuff. And he's just a farmer. And
Mm.
he's like, oh, do you want to keep on talking over my head then? And she kind of feels a little bit bad. But in the beginning, she is quite haughty. But she actually, there's a swerve. That's not who she wants to be. That wears off very quickly. She settles back into the countryside life and she actually prefers it. And when the dad says, you always told me you were so much more at home with the educated people in the continent, she's like, I don't actually think that's true anymore. I quite enjoy being back here. And this book is really trying to espouse this idea of like the simple country life being better. You don't need your capital cities. You don't need your rich people. You just need like nice people living together, do your farming, do your artisan stuff, live in the village and be happy. That is kind of what this book is saying is like the dream life, which to a degree I get. Ignorance is bliss and all that. So the problem is the father is now, well, you can't marry Giles because he's beneath you, even though I promised it.
Uh,
So he
yeah.
causes the problem. And he has a martyr complex as well. He even says to the daughter, do you notice that when you dress nicely and you walk in the streets, people compliment you and they look at you, but when you walk with me, you don't get the same attention? And she's like, well, yeah, because I'm with my dad. And he's like, no, it's because I'm beneath you and I'm a peasant. So once you get married, never speak to me again. And when you see me in the street, snub me and look away because I'm trash and I'm beneath you. And he's putting all these views to her and she's rejecting them, you know?
Yeah. I can get like if she's from her point of view saying, all right, you're actually like not as educated as me. We can't have like great conversation and it's going to be difficult in the relationship in the future.
Mm,
But if she's like, no, I really don't see you as lower than me, like stop putting words in my mouth.
yeah. And the whole
Why
time,
do men always do that to me?
right?
Like,
He's consistently putting words in her mouth the whole time. So then the marriage gets broken off, and she actually says at one point, the worst thing you ever did was educate me. And then he shows her, he's like, well, one day you might have to take over household things because you're the smartest one here, and all my hopes rest on you, and I'm going to put immense pressure on you. And so then he shows her their bank balance, and all the stuff that he's had to buy and sell. And then she notices in theirs, he shows her her own education costs. And she's like, "Oh,
oh,
am I just a piece of business? Am I a chat like a chattel slave? Is that what this is? Like, you see me as no different to selling cows, like educating me." And that's
so
sad.
sad. Yeah. The whole thing is sad that she didn't want to be educated because now she sees issues and
She doesn't fit in with
uh,
her society, but she tries really
yeah.
hard to reassimilate. Meanwhile, there's this other simple peasant girl called Marty, and Marty also loves Giles. Giles is a friend. Giles is a good guy, by the way. He basically doesn't do anything wrong the whole book. Maybe the only thing wrong he does is not noticing how much Marty loves him. But he treats her nicely, just as a friend, you know? She disappears. She's at the beginning, she disappears for a long time when we have this love story. So every plot needs a villain, right? So enter the villain, and that's Dr. Fitzpierce. And he is supposedly, dabbling in black magic and all this kind of stuff. But he's a doctor, he's a scientist, and he looks down on the town. And of course, he's much more educated than everybody else there.
Mm.
So the father is like, well, this is the man that my daughter should marry. The only other educated person in the town.
Okay,
There is
yeah.
a mother, she does nothing in the book. She basically has no say in anything.
At least the father's consistent.
Mm. Now Fitzpierce is originally trying to get with there's like one rich lady in the town, and this rich lady doesn't speak to anyone really. She's very aloof from the town, but she owns all the land, the squire type situation.
Mm.
So poor Marty, who has lovely, beautiful, locks of hair, is forced to give them up because the rich lady wants her hair for a wig. So they just come to her,
Oh,
and the barber of the town is like, yeah, you got to give up your hair because, the woman up in the house on the hill wants it. So there you go.
what? Okay.
So they take her hair, and she's very sad because Giles might not fancy her. But they go out, and they do love her. Marty and Giles are lovely, and they're like planting trees and doing farm work, and they're just fantastic. Meanwhile, Marty's father is unable to do his work, which is like bundling wood together or spars or something they call it. I don't know, to make thatched houses or something. So Marty's doing all the work for her dad. And when Giles comes, he's like, I don't think your dad did this. He looks quite sick. And this is the best work he's ever done suddenly. And they realize that Marty's been doing all the work for him. So Mrs. Sharman, the rich lady, what happens is when Marty's dad dies, there's some weird situation where the house was leased for life. And this whole row of houses was leased on his life. So when the dad dies, not only is Marty homeless, but next door Mr. Giles is homeless. And he writes to her and he says, can I enter the same lease that he had? It might have been a subletting situation, I don't know.
Mm.
And he's like, can I have the lease? I'm happy to pay the rent, whatever. And she says, no, I'm going to have the houses knocked down. So you're homeless, get out. And there's a sad line in the book where it says the whole town was so worried about Mr. Giles Winterbourne. No one spared a thought for Marty sitting upstairs in the bedroom with the corpse of her father.
Oh.
And that's sad. And Marty writes a little mean rhyme. I mean, she's the nicest person, but she does one mean thing. She writes in stones or in sticks or something on the ground a little rhyme about how the girl has become so haughty and about how Giles is now poor and homeless, and therefore he will lose the one he's meant to be married to. But the wife, I feel like she's called Grace. I don't know why I've forgotten her name. I feel like she's the most important character. She changes it, and in this moment she realizes she still loves him. Even though he's now poor, even though he's not educated, even though she's offered to the doctor, she realizes, no, I think I actually still love Marty after all.
All right.
And the dad is like, nope, he's lost his business. This is our excuse to say that our promises to him are null and void. He can't look after you. He's lost his house. So that's sad. You're going to go with Fitzpierce. But of course, Fitzpierce is trying to get off with the rich lady.
Mm.
He also convinces another woman to give him his skull when she dies to do experiments on. And then gets one other girl to cheat on him. So the town does some kind of weird annual race where the girls will run down the hill in the dark and the guys who they're courting are meant to wait to catch them, but it's dark. And so this one girl, Suke, runs down and she's waiting for her man Tim to catch her. And actually Fitzpierce dodges in and catches her and runs away with her. And she says, he embraces her and she says, you're not Tim. And he says, well, do you mind that much? And she goes, maybe not. And he goes off with her.
Oh.
That's later, she's getting married to Tim and she kind of has a weird look at Fitzpierce, and Tim puts two and two together and realizes what's going on and tries to kill him. So this guy's kind of a piece of work. He's the villain of the novel, right? Like he's potentially involved in weird science experiments and black magic, and he's interested in like three different women, right? So there's a really sad, sad, sad part where when he's sick later, and Grace, goes in, she brings the two other women with them and says, "You're all just more worried about him than I am, even. We're basically all his wives. And I guess you share my responsibility here." And that's kind of sad because he was just cheating on her, you know? But
Hmm.
they do separate, and then she really wants to get with Giles. And the saddest part of the whole book, she flees to Giles for help. She doesn't want to marry Fitzpierce. She doesn't want to be with her dad anymore. And Giles says, "Sleep in my shack." He's living in a little shack now because he's got no house. And she's not really that worried about him. She's, "Where will you sleep?" She kind of feigns worry, you know? And he
Hmm.
just says, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. I've got other accommodation," which obviously he doesn't. And she's like, "Cool, fine." And there's a terrible storm, and she stays in his house for several days and goes outside to find him lying outside, exposed to the elements, dying in a ditch. And he dies. And then she's like, "Oh, I have been selfish. The one person I loved." And it's like, "Yep, you were kind of not very nice there because you took his house and let him die." But they couldn't share the house because that might affect her reputation as a woman, you know? Because she's married now, because she does marry Fitzpierce and then they separate.
Oh, okay.
Um, and it's really sad to me. I'm going to give a spoiler because, screw it. She ends up going back to the doctor anyway in the end. And that's so sad for me. And poor Marty, Marty and Grace are going to Giles's grave every day. And at the end, when Grace goes back with the doctor who cheated on her and who was a terrible person, Marty says, "Well, I'm glad because now Giles is all mine and I can go to his grave every day. And even though he never really loved me in life, he's all mine in death." And that's the end.
Oh,
So it's sad, but I love it.
okay. Yeah, that is definitely a tragedy.
Yes.
That that whole bit at the end just reminded, for some reason, I just thought of Quasimodo at the grave. Uh,
Mm.
like it's just, well, that's all there is now. There's
I
not much to their lives after this.
Yeah, I will say that it almost lays on a wee bit too thick in the end with the melodrama, but I love it, so that's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
you do enjoy the melodrama.
I wouldn't recommend you to read it because it's written, for example, how do you flirt? Mayst kiss me if canst catch me. So it's kind of written like that the whole way through,
Okay, yeah, yeah. It's like
which is what I
we're
say to all the
looking at
girls, you know?